Hi, I'm Victoria Bertusa, community content producer at Red Thread, and I'm here today with Laurent Ruseckas. Thank you for being here today, Laurent.
My pleasure.
Laurent is the executive director on the global gas team at First State Gas. So, Laurent, today we're going to talk about the EU sanctions on Russian gas and how it will impact the market. Because the EU has recently adopted legislation phasing out Russian gas supply. Can you please explain this new law and what will the impact be?
Sure. This is an EU regulation that was first published by the European Commission last year in June and submitted through to the Parliament and the Council of the EU. It has just taken effect. It was published in the official register earlier this month. And what it mandates is a phase out of all Russian gas imports to Europe, both pipeline gas and LNG, which will become illegal. It is not sanctions. It is a regulation that applies directly to all EU entities. And so by the November 1st, 2027, EU companies will not be allowed to import any Russian gas. By doing this, what's interesting about this, the EU explicitly decided to de-link the Russia-Ukraine peace process, such as it is, from the gas issue. There was a lot of talk after President Trump was elected and restarted real negotiations to resolve the war. There was a lot of talk about somehow Russian gas coming back to Europe being part of it. And I think the EU decided didn't want anything to do with that, didn't want its gas supply mixed up with negotiations in which they don't have a major role. And so thus this regulation.
And how will this affect long-term contracts? How will this be addressed?
So, well, you raise a good point, and both Hungary and Slovakia have raised this point and complained about it. The buyers, the counterparties of Gazprom in Slovakia and Hungary, have contracts extending till 2031 and 2034, respectively. What the law has been, or the regulation has been designed to do, is to give the buyers the right to declare force majeure. Typically, long-term gas supply contracts have some language in there saying if the law changes, the two sides have to sit down and find a remedy so the contract can continue with the new laws, and if not, then it goes into force majeure. So I think that's pretty clearly what's going to happen here. You won't have the Hungarian state company MVM paying Gazprom anyway for gas it's not getting until 2034. That would be a bad outcome for anyone, and I don't think that's where this is headed.
And how will these sanctions affect Russian LNG?
Okay, well, first of all, these aren't sanctions. This is a regulation. Separately, and by the way, the regulation phases out Russian LNG imports as well. Separately, last autumn, the EU added to its 19th sanctions package a ban on Russian LNG imports that starts a little bit earlier. So that's January 1st, 2027. Why did they do this? It's really like a hat on a hat. That was in response to pressure from the United States. President Trump and Energy Secretary Chris Wright made some comments. Why is the EU still buying Russian gas? Instead of just responding, well, we're working on it, we've got this regulation, it's incredibly complicated, let me try to explain it to you, they just quickly added that to the sanctions package to show that they were doing something. So January 1st, 2027, no more Russian LNG flowing to the EU.
And where does this leave Russian gas? And could they even find another outlet to sell their gas?
Well, first of all, a lot of Russian gas that used to be exported to Europe, and of course, the volumes, this phase out is really addressing the last little bit of Russian pipeline gas. Most of that was phased out when Russia cut supply to Europe and generated an energy price crisis in Europe in 2022. So there's a lot of gas from the big fields in northwest Siberia that is just staying in the field. The biggest thing Russia has done to try to find new markets for this gas is they are pursuing a long-term agreement with China to sell up to 50 billion cubic meters of gas per year through a new pipeline called Power of Siberia 2 that would link these fields and go, I think it's 6,000 kilometers all the way to China and to the market. This is not a done deal. China has not signed a binding sales and purchase agreement without which you really don't have a pipeline. So it's not clear when this will happen. Some perception that China is not in a big rush because the longer they wait, maybe the better price they can get from Gazprom, from the Russian side. But we expect in our base case for this to go forward and be online sometime in the 2030s. But that'll be about a third of the gas that used to be supplied by pipe to Europe from Russia.
And circling back to LNG, What about the Yamal LNG project, and what is the status of the nearby Arctic 2 LNG project?
So Yamal LNG, these are two projects that are have multiple shareholders, but they're led by a private Russian company called Novatek. Yamal LNG has been operating for some years. A lot of the LNG from there has been going to Europe. Some of it goes to China, and in the summer months you can use the so-called Northern Passage that uses the Arctic Sea and cuts the distance to China dramatically. That doesn't really work in winter. So most of this gas is going to the EU. That LNG is going to have to find other markets. Now, the 20th sanctions package, which has just been announced, there's a lot of discussion to go. A lot of things could still happen. But this would ban essentially all of any EU companies from participating in helping transport any Russian LNG, specifically Yamal LNG. So this could have some really repercussions for there if they don't have the specific ice-class vessels they need to get their LNG out to market in winter. Arctic 2 is the second project. This one was very heavily sanctioned by the previous U.S. administration. So it started up in 2024, lifted a few cargoes, no one would touch them. Cargoes went into storage, and it stopped. So Arctic 2 started up again last summer in June, and since then has been delivering a steady stream of cargoes to China. One specific port in China, regasification terminal there, they're taking this LNG. So this is in violation of U.S. sanctions, which are secondary sanctions. So in theory, there are Chinese entities participating in this trade that the U.S. has, from its point of view, the legal right to sanction, but that hasn't happened. And I think that what we believe is that given the broader context of the U.S.-China trade negotiations that are going on, which may lead somewhere later this year, that the U.S. has made the judgment we're not going to try to muddy the waters here by sanctioning this specific project. So for now, that Arctic 2 project has sort of become unlocked despite being under U.S. secondary sanctions.
Unfortunately, Laurent, this is all the time we have today. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a pleasure.